hellos, welcome back to another videos, and today we'll be taking a look at the top 10 cards of Nemesis. The Nemesis is a menesis, because yeah, we'll be talking about some cards, and this set was actually not that bad. But some of the cards on here mostly see playing in EDH, but there's been some in standard, I guess. You could kind of say that, and some that are still played today. But we'll be taking a look at the 10 best cards, in my opinion, because people think this is actually like the official top 10 of Nemesis of all cards. No, I mean, you could look at more in depth top decks like Nisa Home Magic, who does top 10s on sets and different types of strategies of cards, and you can look at his list. His list is a lot more accurate. And let me tell you, he does do a really good job on it. So, might subscribe to him. Thanks. So anyways, let's just move on to the top 10. And number 10, it is Submerge. So this is a cycle of spells we'll be getting into where you can pay the mana cost, but you have to reach a certain condition. So this I actually kind of like. So Submerge is a 4 blue instant, and if your opponent controls a forest, and only if, and you control an island, and only if you control an island, you may pay Submerge without paying its mana cost. Now, you will probably control an island because you're paying blue mana for this, so I guess you could be also running Chromatic Lantern, but I don't know. But anyways, this is basically a free spell for put target creature on top of its owner's library. So it's kind of like that card with Fibblefip on it. So yeah, and I actually kind of like this card. I mean, and it's free if you can meet those conditions. Now, most of this actually saw play in sideboards, but this wasn't really the most played sideboard card because there weren't a lot of aggro decks back then. It was mostly just decks about, like efficient creatures, like Evan of the Forest and stuff like that, but not really anything else of that nature. But yeah, I mean, Submerge is still a pretty good card if you can pay without paying its mana cost, and even if you can't, it's basically totally lost. And that can be good in some circumstances. So most of the times this will probably see play in EDH if you're playing a 4-player game. Now if you're just playing 1v1, probably don't put this in. But it's really good against 4-player games. Trust me, you'll like it. So yeah, let's move on to number 9, which people will be surprised that this is on the list because it did see a considerable amount of play for a while. And number 9 is Sealfire. Yes. So why did I put this on number 9? It's basically kind of like Shock. Well, I put this on number 9 because I felt of it as kind of like a one-off kind of spell. Now, granted, Seal of Fire is basically Shock. Let's not get that wrong here. But you could just put in Shock for the same value. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still a pretty good card. But it just really didn't see play because of the Seal of Fire type of effect it was. And it was an enchantment, so okay, there's some benefit to having a permanent and you could sack it, deal the damage instead of that. Now I really only figured that this would be on number 9 because not a lot of people just really played this card. It was just a permanent spell wasting some mana. And most cards, they take instants and sorceries to the whole new level. So I don't know why this is number 9. People can argue about the comics, but there's some other pretty powerful cards in here that probably deserve that. So number 9, Seal Fire. This was only saw play in when Lurrus was legal because what you can do in burn decks and when Lurrus was in basically your sideboard is you can basically play this with Lurrus and Seal Fire, and every turn you would get this, and you could do 2 damage to your opponent. And this was good because you can automatically in the game, if you cast this and you have Lurrus out, you can deal 4 damage for 1 mana. That's pretty good and nice to have. So a lot of decks in Modern played this when Lurrus had the non-errata version of Companion. Unfortunately, it got errata, so now you had to pay an extra 3. So Sealfire stopped seeing play. It still sees kind of some play in some burn decks in Modern, but not as much as I'd like to expect. Most people would just take Shock because of its value and it's easier to find caliber and cards. There's a lot more stock in, stuff like that. But Steelfire, don't get me wrong, is still a pretty good card. And it still sees play today in some burn decks in Modern. pretty nice card though overall. So yeah, let's move on to number 8 because everyone wants to just go through this list. I'm just going to this because I gotta speed it up. But yeah, number 8 is Skyshroud Claim, and people might be mad at this card for being number 8, but I'm not. Because it's 3 green for a sorcery for search your library for up to 2 forest cards. Forest cards, by the way, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Now, the thing that interests me is that they come in untapped. So that's why I put it on this list, is because you can search for any forest card and they come in untapped. It's just crazy value for basically 2 mana because those lands come in untapped. So you're basically getting 2 mana for free. And besides that, you can get other forest cards that may need it, like a Dryad. So I only put it on this list because of the efficiency of it. Now, this only saw play in Commander because, oh damn, that's just some good ramp. But also because it's just an efficient card that could search up basically any forest land. So I put this on the list only because of that reason. It's just a good ramp card in general, and it just helps you find your mana ramp quickly. And it deserves the number 8 spot on this list just for that effect alone. And let's move on to the other effect that might not be good for some people, but I think is kind of good sometimes. And number 7 is going to go to Massacre. And yes, people are going to be upset that this is number 7, but bear with me. Let me just talk about the history of this card. So it's a 2 black for if an opponent controls the plains and you control a swamp, you may play this without paying its mana cost. But what is the effect of this? Well, all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. So this actually saw play in sideboards against Necropotence decks, especially against aggressive creatures. Now there was a lot of aggressiveness in the standard at the time. Don't get me wrong; it wasn't just Necropotence decks, but Necropotence would bring this in against aggressive decks because they needed the extra edge for some of the things they would do. And even if their creatures got killed, they still would regain the value from Necropotence drawing in more powerful creatures. Plus, the bonus if the opponent was playing a Plains deck, then you could just cast this for free and draw your efficient creatures with Necropotence. So this saw sideboard play in Necropotence decks to fight it off against aggro decks. Because that was kind of one of its biggest weaknesses. If they run into mono red, oh god, they were in trouble. Because the more they paid life, the more death would come upon them. So they decided that, okay, Necropotence out, so Massacre did not see play anywhere else, but it still sees some play in Commander, just because it's a free spell and you get that -2/-2 sweeper. It's really, really nice once you think about it. And yeah, that's all it's all playing. And I just don't like looking at this card because it's kind of scary. Ooh, look at the scariness of this person. And that artwork's kind of demonic. So I don't know why Wizards didn't ban this art. I'm gonna censor for you, sake, guys. I'm sorry. We can't show this, and we can't show this, so we're not gonna show it because we're gonna move on to number 6, which is Tangle Wire. Oh my goodness, is this card just stupid? So this is Tangle Wire. Oof, no duh. So it's 3 mana artifact for fading 4. You can read that abomination of text, but basically it just has 4 time counters on it, and when the last one's removed, it gets sacrificed. But at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may tap an untapped artifact, creature, or land he or she controls for each fade counter on Tanglewire. So you may be thinking to yourself, oh god, this is just another stacks freaking card. And yeah, you're kind of right. But I really just don't think of this as, both ways because you actually get a choice better than your opponent because you get to tap down one less thing because Tanglewire counts for you tapping it down. Oh baby, isn't that fun? So Tanglewire mostly didn't even see play. I don't even know why it doesn't see play in Gola Stack Sticks and Vintage, but it doesn't. But this sees play in Stack Sticks in CEDH. And Tanglewire is really good against decks that like to get basically some fast starts with efficient mana, and can slow down the game really quickly. Plus, you can use this with other commanders that like to blink permanents, and what you could do is have a lockout state with this card. Now this card still sees play in CDH today, but not as much as you would think. It's still a very powerful card in its fact because you get to tap down one less than your opponent because technically you could tap down this and there's no disadvantage to that. So that's why I put it here at number 6. So oh my god, what are the next cards going to be like freaking flash fires freaking no. We're going to see what number 5 is in a moment. And yeah, people might be disappointed, but number 5, let's move on. Let's just get out of the tangle. Number 5 is the opposite of a hell. It's Core Haven. Okay, that didn't really work out as I expected. But bear with me. So Core Haven, it looks like there's a lowercase h, but it's capitalized. Don't stress it enough. It's capitalized. And this is a legendary land for tap, add 1 colors to your mana, like every other land does in the game, but this one is special because it has an activated ability for prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to by a target attacking creature this turn. So, why is it this good, what you might ask? It's basically just like Maze of Ith, but worse. Well, it is slightly more better, less better. I have no idea. But it is a land that does prevent combat damage, and that could be good in some circumstances. Now, granted, you have to pay 1 and a white each time to prevent some damage, but that's good on the land because you basically can't get rid of it or counter it. So it could be really good to shut down some oppressive creatures that might be attacking you. Let alone, you don't want anything attacking you that has infect. Well, I don't think that would prevent. Well, no, that would prevent the combat damage. So yeah, this would be good against basically big boys and other stuff like that. But you say, hey, why not just run Maze of Ith? Well, Maze of Ith is not on this list, and this deserves a higher spot on the list because of its ability. And I think that ability is kind of oppressive. There was even one time in EDH where this card actually hindered me from using the deck because I was running a Voltron deck. And yeah, this basically shut me out because I didn't really have any way to get rid of it other than Ghost Quarter if I could find it. But I couldn't find it, so I lost. And yeah, sometimes one card can shut them down all the time. And that was this card. This card, man, definitely not a Haven. I mean, what are you using? Is that clouds or is that just like fatbergs you find in the sewer? I don't understand what that's made out of. Really weird artwork sometimes. Really weird. But you know what's even weirder? Accumulated knowledge at number 4. Accumulated knowledge. So yeah, this is accumulated knowledge at number 4, and it's 1 blue in an instant. I mean, people probably already know what this card is, but I'll read the effect anyways. Draw a card, then draw cards equal to the number of accumulated knowledge cards in all graveyards. In all graveyards. Keep that in mind. So, yes, accumulated knowledge is basically 1 and a blue for just a draw card. But this gets better over time if you have more in your graveyard. So you can draw up to 4. But wait, there's more. And it says in all graveyards. So that means if your opponent is playing accumulated knowledge and you're playing accumulated knowledge, you can draw up to 8 cards for 2 mana. Broken, I know. So yeah, this just saw play basically everywhere in standard for the longest time in blue decks because it was kind of efficient at getting card draw spells. And if you were playing the mirror match with accumulated knowledge, you can get more value out of it. So this doesn't really see play anymore. It's probably still a good card if you're playing in Highlanders or in Team Commander decks because you can use both of your accumulated knowledges to get some value and draw some cards. Pretty good, right? Especially if you play a 3-headed giant. Oh my gosh, is that good? Or 2-headed giant, what am I saying? So yeah, accumulated knowledge is definitely one of the cards that reminds you of frantic inventory because that's what it is. It's just frantic inventory. It's already in standard right to this now, but it says in your graveyard. It doesn't say in all, but still, basically like frantic inventory. So yeah, so let's just move on to number three, which I think people would love to see this again, but I wouldn't. And it's just Parallax Wave. Oh goody. I mean, it's an interesting card, don't get me wrong. It's 2 white for an enchantment with fading 5. So then you remove a fade counter from Parallax Wave and exile target permanent. Just remove it. Remove one fade counter from it. You can do that. Oh yes. And then when you can exile a creature, and then when this leaves, each player returns to the battlefield R cards he or she owns with Parallax Wave. So this actually saw play in a very fringe deck, and it was kind of weird to see this actually happen. But it was played in anything using Replenish, and this was in Standard, and it could return back the Parallax Wave. And what you can do with the Parallax Wave is you can pound down on creatures if your opponent has a lot of creatures, and you could use a certain card like Opalescence to gain value off of your enchantments you had in the graveyard, Parallax Wave being one of them. And if you were playing the mirror match and they were using Opalescence too, you can gain value off of exiling their creatures with this. Oh, and it created a very, very weird state, didn't it? And this actually saw play in those type of decks. So yeah, and Parallax Wave is just has a long history of decks it was in, but I'm not going to go into that further in detail. But yeah, Parallax Wave is just an interesting card, and people actually like this type of effect. And I don't even think we see this anymore, but it's just very interesting to think that it had this much flavor, and we don't see cards like this anymore have that much kind of flavor going with them, because Parallax Wave is kind of like just a wave of destruction where creatures leave, but they come back once the wave is gone. It's kind of a weird take on the whole thing of abduction. So yeah, it has some flavor and it's very interesting. I could see why people like this card, not because of just the art, but because of the functionality of what this card does. It's very interesting. So yeah, and that's why I put it on for some reason. I mean, I give you just an idiot. Number three. Really thought it could be number four, but I don't know. It's just a really interesting card, and I think it has some power to it. So more power to you. But these next two, oh boy, are they just the definition of degen. There's always got to be those degenerate cards in these sets. What is it with that? So let's move on to number two. Let's just move on to the one degenerate mess. And we got this hoe. Yes. Lin Civi. People probably already know who this creature does, but I'll read it anyways. So it's a 1 white legendary rebel legend. For X, tap it, search your library for a rebel card with comparative mana cost X or less, and put it into play, not on the battlefield. Okay. Then shuffle your library. Then for just three generic mana, put target rebel card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. How about just say shuffle it? How about just put it on top? How about just put it in a ham sandwich? Because you're basically going to put it back in your library to use that ability. So even if your freaking rebels die, you just can get them back with this creature. So why is this at number two? What am I trying to get at? Well, this is at number two because it was actually played in a block event where it was just rebels versus mercenaries, and rebels were really dominant. And Liv Civi was part of the problem that made Rebels decks just way too good. And even for the standard that she was in, she was just way too good. So she had to be banned in both block. I don't know if she was banned in her standard, but she was definitely banned in her block constructed format because she was just way too efficient of getting Rebels into play. And she had to be banned to fix that. And people say that was probably one of the worst blocks they've ever had to play. And I can kind of agree with that because if people were just playing Rebels because of this will, I can't even tell if it's a girl or a guy. I, I just can't do that because Magic is disassociated with gender. I don't understand. But anyways, my dog is barking, and yeah, Lynn Sivy was just broken, and she's got the whip to prove it. So break some backs. And let's move on before we just die and delve deeper into this, and I gotta let my dog go out. So number one is days. Days, oh my goodness, oh my days. So yes, people probably saw this coming, but it's days. So it's one blue, but you don't even need to pay attention to that because it's another one of these broken cards again. So you just may return an island to your hand, just pay its mana. So counter target spell unless controller pays one. Basically censor, but for free. So why is this bad? That seems like a bad effect. Why even print that? Well, I'll tell you. This actually still sees play in vintage Xerox decks. This uses this card uses to basically gain value of casting your non-creature spells, or you have your like little Arcanist, and you can use this just to counter a spell for free. But they do have to pay one mana. But usually in vintage, sometimes they may slip up and they be like, okay, return an island to my hand, days, and it doesn't say tapped or untapped. You can return any island too. And I gave it number one because free counterspells have always been broken, even if they had like a slight, a slight like hindrance to them, like Pain One. And Censor did see play a little bit in Pioneer, but it was mostly played in a control deck like Inverter of Truth. So having days be free is really, really bad because it just made decks say, okay, do you want to pay the one? It's kind of like Ristic Study. And sometimes the players don't have the one mana to have, so the spell's countered. And even if they do, you wasted their mana just for you to say, okay, your spell can go through. So they basically kind of taxed you at that point. And that can be kind of undervalued and undermined, and people say this card is not that good, but people just don't have the knowledge to think, wow, you should counterspell unless I pay one. I'll pay one. But even if you pay one, you still get taxed out of a mana. And this can actually be a 2-for-1 sometimes because you can cast a spell, even if you have to return an island. And it can be a counterspell, and you counterspell, or it could be a spell that says, okay, you have to pay one extra mana to cast your spell. And that could be a really tough choice in some circumstances, and most people would probably not pay the one, especially in vintage, because they want to get fast mana really, really quick. So, Days is just one of those cards where it's just like kind of iffy to point out if it's number one or it's number two or it's number 10. But I think it's number one because of how efficient it could be at disrupting people's plans. And that's why it deserves number one on this list. Well, that does it for the top 10 of Nemesis. Please stay tuned while we do Prophecy, which will be 5 cards. And I'll see you guys in the next video, because that was it. Bye, and peace.